Hi friends, in Planet Earth Dating, it's Thursday, April 14th, 2016. Phil and a host of Body-Snatchers here in the Lynn-Life, a 12-year-old Luce, and a host of Body-Snatchers in the Jamie Body Mind. We do have some other teammates in other dimensions. Most of us in the subatomic. We're all subatomic to someone.
That's true.
And most of us in the physical. Today marks the beginning of Season 3 of the Angelic Initiative's formally videoed efforts. This is reaching the end of the second year of our formally videoed efforts, but we do really have the instruction to emphasize how long this effort has been going on.
That's true.
For well over a decade, just not formally stated as such, not revealed as such. And roughly 2 years ago, we, I guess you could say, came out to the world about what we were really working on.
That's
the
true.
Assignment to manifest the divine plan, no matter what anyone else does or doesn't do. That has remained our foundational intention, and we have learned an awful lot during this period of time that we have begun to formally video and share with the worlds our work.
That's true.
We're now engaged in a great experiment to see whether or not it's possible to maintain search for truth space. And they're referring to Abraham Lincoln's speech, a test to see whether this nation or any other nation so conceived. It's the Gettysburg Address. Thank you. We're now engaged in a great test to see whether the search for truth process is possible to sustain in an environment where it really seems that the hidden truth, what's under the band-aid for almost all sentient presences in all dimensions, is, I don't want to do it, and you can't make me.
That's true.
And where people don't have the resolve to do the right thing, in many cases don't have the intention to do the right thing, and in many cases don't even have the willingness to do the right thing when it's presented to them. And by people we mean sentiences, sentient presences. So under those circumstances, is it even possible to maintain a search for truth space? This is the experiment that we are currently participating in, and the experiment is set to run until July 7th. At that point in time, the experiment will be declared complete, and we'll discover what the results are, and after that, presumably decisions will be made as to what now. What now in order to manifest the divine plan, no matter what anyone else does or doesn't do. And with that, the formally videoed portions of Season 3 begin. What do we know? We know that color coding is helpful.
That's true.
And that it is very helpful for us to be able to look at an episode quickly and see by the color coding what era of the effort the episode originated in.
That's true.
For example, the first year of formally videoed efforts, these two bodies' minds were dressed in black and white. Whenever we see a black and white video, the very stark, clear delineation of that which is true and that which is not true,
That's true.
we know it's Season 1. When we see a mixture of blue and white, and on the lower body black and tan, then we
That's
know
true.
it's Season 2. When we see the palette expanding to include, we believe, greens, purples, and patterns that are not offensive but no words,
That's true.
then it's Season 3, and so on.
That's true. Oh, it's like when the Lynn-Life was a CPA and she used to organize her files by year, by color.
Yes.
It's like that. So you could
Yeah.
say, okay, that year was the green year.
That's right.
There it is, right there. That's the
right.
file.
New clients in 1992 are purple files.
That's true.
Etc. New clients in 1993 are red files,
That's true.
etc.
A fast, effective filing system.
Yes. And what do I know? I know that it also indicates the complexity of the search. We can see that in that first year of the cloistering, that we were working with the first wave of attempting to discern whether or not a residential program would work in order to teach the search for truth skills.
That's true.
We had attempted to teach them first in just classroom settings, and then in classroom settings with mentoring, and then with a weekly intensive program, and all kinds of things other than residential. And finally, the only thing left that we hadn't tried to teach this to humanoids was a residential program, and we began that residential program with 2 test students, and one of them lasted maybe a month, and the other one is still here.
That's true.
What now?
Now, what is the right thing
to do in order to manifest the divine plan, no matter what anyone else does or doesn't do? Well, clearly a search for truth space is still the assignment.
That's true.
I get the come on hand, keep going hand. What is the right thing to do in order to upgrade the standards of integrity to that which will actually work to manifest the divine plan? Ooh, energy shifting. There we go. And what now in order to reestablish search for truth space? What is the right thing to do in order to reestablish search for truth space? And it's like the ceiling opens up, and I see that Showtime Guy.
That's true.
And we've seen him on other levels. Smaller versions of this same soul have said to other rooms of people, "It's showtime, friends. You're supposed to have manifested the divine plan. What have you got to show for yourself?"
That's true.
And a larger aspect of this same presence is here, saying to many presences, showtime.
That's true.
He appeared within the last week, really jumping down the throats of multiple team members.
That's true.
Right.
Of the soul team.
Of the soul team.
In the Search for Truth community.
Right.
That's
Who were all, at that point in time, already revealed as Body-Snatchers.
That's true, by the technical definition of Body-Snatchers.
Right, they're Body-Snatchers.
That's true.
And we have seen him reset the clock, and another experiment is running, and I can tell that it's shorter than the July 7th clock, which I can also see in his workroom.
That's true.
There's another clock ticking, and there's an experiment running.
That's true.
And that we're also having these interesting phenomena of, from our perspective, of people turning into cardboard cutouts of themselves.
That's true.
There's a pileated woodpecker right there.
Right there.
That's not a pileated.
No, it's not.
That's a big...
But there must be a pileated, because that was a pileated call, and the one we're seeing is either a red-headed or a red-bellied or
well,
a flicker.
it was a woodpecker's call, but it wasn't... I don't know that it was a pileated. I can't tell for sure.
Ooh.
I would have to...
Now I'm realizing it's possible I've lumped all woodpecker calls into pileated calls.
All white women
look the same. Way up.
So... This Showtime Guy seems to have an intersection of interests with our community. He sees that our community, our Search for Truth effort, draws a certain cluster of criminals, breakers of divine law, and these are criminals who he really has a hunger to bring to justice. So he sees we're like a speed trap for certain aspects of divine criminality, and he's coming to capture what he can. It's like to harvest what he can from our effort. This is a strong intersection of interests.
That's true.
We just got another message that we've gotten multiple times today and multiple times over the months, is that all white women look the same is the joke, but the point is that their presence is up there trying to say that one vessel is the same as another. And they were testing this morning quite
That's true.
extensively, and every time they ran the test showed that they were incorrect, and we said, please stop running that test.
That's true.
And they have continued to run the test, and so we say to the Showtime Guy, are you interested in criminals like this? I think he likes the idea of apprehending criminals who are pretending that things are the same when they aren't.
That's true.
And he's talking about fool's gold and real gold, and how that's counterfeiters. He's talking about
that's
counterfeiters. He's calling them counterfeiters.
That's true.
But to remember that what we have here are different vessels, and each of
That's
them
true.
has a purpose, and that they're not themselves claiming to be anything other than what they are. I think that what we have are other presences. He's going,
That's true.
other presences who are pretending that one is the same as the other, and using that, he's nodding, using
feel
that as
nodding.
an excuse to do something that's as far from their actual assignment as they can possibly get without being openly disrespectful of the assignment.
That feels true. Are you interested in criminals like this?
Maybe not. Maybe we define it more narrowly.
That could be. 'Cause
That
I
might
don't
be
feel
hitting a
his
little too
jumpy.
close to
That could be what that
home.
feels like.
Okay. Well, how about pick up counterfeiters?
That he feels interested in. And I feel tuggy feelings.
Yes, I do too. Things being removed.
That's
Now,
true.
to the children who are in the pillar, we say this is a good opportunity. Let's all of us start to pump up the gong and raise our channels and reach from above as well as pumping from below to attempt to move the sticky clogs of error patterns,
That's true.
so that we can begin making new mistakes instead of continuing to make the same old mistakes over and over again.
That's true.
Work up these clogs and hand them up to, I see a sad Ra up there. Let's give
I
them to that
feel
sad
sad
Ra.
Ra.
And to watch, to say to the Showtime Guy, watch this, because often these people don't handle this very well.
That's true.
I feel as though there's an interest, and those are people who are in a responsible position of authority and are supposed to be doing something, and they aren't.
That's true, and it feels like we're dumping it on their desks.
Yes. Are you interested in apprehending people like that?
Very much interested in apprehending people like that.
Very much. And again, the emphasis comes around to what each of us can do. All we can control is our attitudes, our choices, the choices we make with regard to how to think about things.
That's true.
Control our experiences of sentience, and to choose to see everything as motivation to do what we're supposed to do, rather than as excuse to avoid our responsibilities, is crucial.
That's true.
To find the gifts in things, and to maintain an open curiosity and attitude of experimentation. I know what they're referring to. They gave us a list a while back of actions, choices that were helpful.
That's true. Are they referring to potato?
Yes,
That's what it feels
that's
like.
it. They're referring to potato. Do you remember what it
Yeah.
breaks down as?
Potato is a list of steps that takes us from an inconvenient reality to living with integrity.
Yes.
And this might be different from what used to be channeled for potato, but what it is first
Acknowledge the
inconvenient reality, recognize and acknowledge that it exists and is true, then choose a good attitude about it.
Develop an attitude of experimentation.
Don't
get hung up on what we can't do, but
Do
what we can do. Take action. Adjust the theory.
That's true. Build commitment.
Yes.
Take more action. Adjust the theory.
And
Build
then-
commitment.
And then commit to resolving the inconvenient issue.
That's true.
Commit to resolving it. Develop a resolve to do the right thing.
That's true.
I like that.
I like that too. Correct.
And that's good advice. Thank you for that. Yes,
That's
we can
true.
focus on that.
That's really helpful.
Thank you. It's possibly not just potato.
It could
There's
be
also vision and trust, that you're highlighting for us how important vision and trust are.
is. That's
And I know
true.
that trust is part of the packet of characteristics that are essential, that includes willingness to do the work, courage, integrity, as well as ability to discern the truth.
That's true.
Humility, selflessness, trust in the direction from above,
That's
and then
true.
stability in those characteristics. Stability in those characteristics, not stability in anything else. Stability in and of itself isn't helpful. Stability in those characteristics is helpful.
That's true.
I know we know that, but this vision component, that's not hit any other list.
That's true.
Interesting. We're live streaming that up. I disagree, because we're not supposed to be the ones providing the vision. We're supposed to be the ones trusting. Wiser minds above are supposed to be providing the vision. Now we've been coming up shy of wiser minds above. When we test vibrationally, there isn't anybody that we can feel.
That's true.
And now that our Ra is evaporated, we're a little bit shy of vision. But I know what our Ra would do, and we can go with that for a while.
That's true.
It will get stale, I'm sure of that, but it works right now.
Maybe an element of trust, of necessary trust, is vision, of being able to see that there's
Trust
something
is
I can't
faith
see.
in things not seen.
That's true. Faith in things I can't see.
Good leaders have vision. Good leaders are visionary.
That's true.
To catch a vision of spirit, perhaps.
That
We
could
could
be.
do that. Catch the vision.
Because I know that when the Lynn-Life moved here, she looked at this empty, barren lawn and said, someday what's going to be here is a forest, and I'll plant it myself. Which is vision, and also trust that it's going to, that if I just do what I'm supposed to do, it will work out.
And take out the invasives. Buy a
That's
chainsaw.
true. By
Buy a
chainsaw.
Take out the invasives.
That's true.
Make it happen. Plant them by seed, if necessary.
That's true. So it is a kind of vision.
It is a vision.
Because that was vision and trust
And action.
and action.